Blacks in Technology.
Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology.
Welcome everyone to the 34th episode of the Blacks in Technology audio podcast. Technology tour guide for the TV. Really created as your influence on Blacks Technology community site. You can check us out at www.blackstechnology.net. Also catch us on Twitter at Black in Technology. It's BLKINTCHNOLGY. Also we have a LinkedIn group as well as Blacks in Technology. It is October 24, 2012. And if this is your first time listening to the podcast, Black Technology is an online social community of Black technologists. Our goal is to connect, share, inspire, and grow. So we connect through community, through the site, share our knowledge with each other on the site. We inspire others, by talking about tech, talking about some issues, our experiences. And we help each other grow our careers, grow our passion for technology, and we help the community. Right now, Black Technology, we have currently 665 members nationwide. So we have a few more members sign up since our last podcast, so we'll welcome those members. And just keep supporting Black Technology, spread the word. We're up to 1,200 followers on Twitter. So that's exciting as well. 100 members on the LinkedIn group. So just keep the support coming and keep things open. Another announcement, we're really close to launching the Black Technology Tech Digest. That's going to be online technology publication with articles written entirely by Black technology professionals, subject matter experts. So for that to be launched within the next few weeks. Pretty excited about that. And I'm also excited about our guest on tonight's podcast. We have Ryan Ray on the show. She is product manager at Salesforce.com. She's also the founder and director of Pitch Mixer. We're going to get into that. And she's also involved with Law Brown. She's out of the San Francisco Bay Area, so we want to go ahead and welcome her to the show. Thanks a lot for joining us tonight.
Thank you for inviting me, Greg. Appreciate it.
No problem. So you actually on a video with Long Right, and that's the kind of thing where it's just like, hey, I got to get off on a podcast, so we can show you some emails and kind of make it happen. So definitely appreciate you coming on. Why don't you give us a little bit of your background, where you're from, and we'll go from there.
Sure. So I'm from Oakland, California, born and raised. I, come from a big family. I've been in technology for about 15 years now. I started really young. And most people thought I was my daughter. Most people still think I'm my daughter. Yeah, I've got a baby face. But yeah, so basically just out of California. I went to community college, local community college, Laney College. I studied local arts. Technology and everything with my startup, and just decided to be starting some things going on right now.
Excellent. So you started university studies. How did you actually get your start in technology?
So I started in technology far before I even knew what local studies was. Yeah, I was just one of those kids who I started programming when I was 11. So I started programming in BASIC and HTML, Visual Basic, C programming. I did a lot of that stuff really early on. And it wasn't until I got to college and it was hard for me to select a major. Originally, actually, it's a funny story. When I first started, it's kind of a sad story, but originally I was going to major in computer science. But my counselors were like, oh no, you're just need to find some really just take the computer science department anyway. And so although I took the class that I was interested in, I didn't actually major in computer science. I just continued studying technology on my own. And I studied liberal arts, and I'm an artist also. I love art. I love to write. I love to read, I like to think of myself as a, just general artist.
So you like to read, you like art, and you're a quote-unquote techie geek, so you got more comics then.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we'll get to that. Okay, we'll get to that. So your self-taught for much. Did you have any inspirations or anything like that? I mean, what was it about? For me, my mom at the time, she was actually dating a guy who was just a heavy electronics guy, and he would pretty much take me to, he worked at this local community college, but he did a lot of video work, but he would pour over these, electronic schematics that he had, and he would, just teach me little things, and things like that kind of got me interested in not just the fact that things work, but how they work. So, I always feel something that was kind of like my first really influence into technology. Did you have anything like that? So kind of okay.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I come from the hood, so, ghetto, we take things apart all the time because we don't have toys. So, the radio breaks, we're going to take the radio apart, we're going to try to put it back together, we're going to try to fix it, we're going to take something out of this, device and put it into the other device. So we did a lot of that stuff. So I have a really good family. My mom's had 8 children. I'm a single mom, and so there was a lot of us, and we all kind of got together to creatively play with things and write things at the same time. I remember one time our Nintendo broke, and we had to open up the Nintendo to fix it. And I don't remember how we fixed it now, so all I know is that it worked. After we went inside of it, it worked. So yeah, it's a lot of things like that, and also, I have 5 older brothers, and so they worked on cars, and I would go and watch them work on cars and work on cars with them. By the time I was a teenager, I was working on my own cars also. So, I think we just kind of were always interested in doing engineer-type things. We may not know what it was called, those times, but, we did have that curiosity.
Gotcha. That's funny because I come from a pretty large family. There's 8 of us. I live with my dad growing up with my mom. 5 kids, 8 kids as well. 5 boys and 3 cousins.
Oh, my God. Any ratio there.
Yeah.
That was about the ratio, though.
Exactly. Actually, it's funny because I remember when I was 7 years old, and at the time I was just like, man, just a few I don't think any of the girls were born in some of it. She told me that she had wished for some reason, there was someone that spoke more than if you wish on a Buckeye, that the wish would come true. So she actually wished for 5 boys first. She went back to 5 boys and then 3 girls. It worked out when the science and technology comes to I don't know how that happened.
I've only had one thing, this thing has a good ratio, though.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's just my family. It's so, became an entrepreneur at 16 years old. So you got the entrepreneur part pretty early. And tell us about your first startup, your first company you ran. Sure.
So, first company, my brother, my older brother, we started a company called Virtual Home. And what we did is we have a storefront. We did computer repair, PC repair, Mac repair. We did network did a lot of web development out of there, did a lot of web programming. Back then, that was the time where, AA had to really crack down on a lot of, audio things. And so I would configure websites to stream music and things like that. A lot of that stuff that was really early on. This was in the .com boom. So a lot of stuff now, just everyday things, they were really innovative back then, and they really developed expertise in those areas. And it was great. It was a great experience because we had this little shop, and people would just stop by just to learn about what we were doing. And I just always remember kind of feeling like we were kind of like a little shining beacon on this block in the middle of North Oakland, California. And the kids would come by, and everybody would just come by and just talk to us. And everybody thought I was somebody's daughter. When they came in, and they didn't want me touching their computers. But eventually they realized that I knew what I was doing. But it was a great experience.
All right, so 16 years old, and they have a technology consultant job. Everybody had to be having that pretty good, so we had to be like the freshest kid on the block.
Oh, my goodness. No. I mean, when I say we came from, when I said poor, I mean we were really poor. Like, my mom was not the kind of person to take handouts and things like that. So, we didn't have a lot of social services. So, pretty much every resource that we got, we used it up in its entirety. She really stretched every dime. And so, when I was a teenager, probably by the time I was 13 years old, I started to feel that pressure of, being a teenager and, wanting to have the hot shoes but not having them, wanting to have the hot clothes but not having them. What me and my sister started to do is we went out and got a sewing machine, and we went out and started making our own clothes. So from the time when I was 13 until I was probably around 23, until I just didn't have time to do it anymore, all of the clothes that I wore are made. We were really different. We were fashion hackers, and if we could have figured out how to make shoes back then, or Nike just washed out like but yeah, we made all of our own clothes, and we made really amazing stuff too. I mean, early on, it was different, but then we just became known, and people just loved it. People complimented us a lot. But we had to go, and we just figured out different ways to hack through it.
Which is an approach to technology yourself.
Yes. Me and my older brother were still really into technology. We collaborate all the time. I mean, he's my biggest mentor. Anytime I'm facing problems, whether it's political or leadership type of thing, or whether it's technology, what's going on in this area that I don't have expertise in this area, he's still one of those people.
That's excellent. And that's, I mean, that's an excellent story just because, people think that, if you start a technology consulting firm or anything like that, that you have to have money to cook out some money, or what really all you really need to start is the knowledge and the desire, the willingness to go out there and learn, and, go out there and get some clients, and they go from there. Actually, one of my friends who helped me start the technology site, he actually started the technology consulting firm, in his early 20s, and it's pretty much, you don't have any real upfront costs besides, business cards or something like that, and your knowledge, and then you just got to go out there and get the business.
Yeah. And I always tell people, like, if you're hungry, that's the thing that's going to kill you more than anything. Just being hungry about it. And scrappy about something. It's not, you know, there's no single way of doing anything. You just got to get creative and trust yourself. And don't be afraid of people's judgment.
I like that. What you said, about having more than one way of doing it. You can tell your program because I'm going to have programs. It's kind of like a mind church. You can tackle this problem for a number of different ways. This stuff something here get a self-taught person, technology person, self-taught programmer. And I know, you know, for me, it's self-taught that, you know, we start off with knowing best practices. And we're not someone who tell us about what resources do you use to kind of learn from the best practices, ways of designing software, because you're architect as well, or software architect as well. So tell us different ways that you went about, you know, just learning some of these best practices and do's and don'ts.
I just keep playing the chance I got. I mean it. I mean, you know, when you learn something, you want to go out and do it however you figure out how to do it. You're going to say, you know what, it works this way. Okay, I figured out that much. Here's what I do now. And, you know, you talk to people about that. And the first thing that's going to happen is people are going to challenge you. They're going to think you've done it wrong. And so I don't believe in just accepting what anyone just tells you, but I believe in challenging. I believe in healthy debate. So anytime somebody would be open to discussing topics around whatever I was working on, whether it was technology, whether it was design, I always welcomed it, and a lot of times we would debate about it. You know, having my opinion, they have theirs, and we always just having some kind of transfer. Some kind of transfer always happens. You learn something, you might teach them something also. And so I think healthy debate and healthy, conversation is really critical to learning best practices. And always, never be afraid to create best practices. You might really do something fast, but you don't know it if you haven't put it out there and tested it, and had somebody come, at you and try to knock you down. So, I just think that you really just got to get out there and be social with it and get to know people and learn from people and teach people.
That's a great answer. A lot of people, I agree. A lot of people are kind of non-confrontational. So they kind of accept what anyone tells them, especially when they think that what that person is, kind of looking how senior, so if that person is have a higher rank than them, they're a senior software architect as opposed to a junior architect. Anything they say is pretty much gold, and so they don't, as you put it, they help the debate. They don't go back and forth with that person and say, well, okay, you did it like that, so tell me why, or I don't think it should be done like that, I think it should be done like this, this might be a better way. But some people are just kind of, that confrontational, and that, they just get hurt up in the long run.
Yeah.
So I definitely agree.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you just gotta get out there and be comfortable having difficult conversations. Sometimes you might end up looking stupid too. I mean, I've said it before, but you get over it.
So, if you're like me, and you put yourself taught, I'm doing the technical books or resources to help with the technical career. What technical books or resources have helped you in your technical career?
Oh, wow, that's a really good question. Man, I read a lot, and I've always read a lot. The book I read the most is actually the Bible. trust your intuition. So I believe that's definitely a resource for me and helping me to have faith in myself and my ability that, that God has a destiny for me. My favorite book in the Bible is the Psalms of David. I would read those like every day. Like literally to this day, when I'm on the train, going into work, I'll be reading my Psalms of David just to get me ready. Because David was like the first, he was like the first warrior, so who's Goliath, he saved his king and his family and, the world. He was a great leader. He made mistakes, he had amazing triumphs before. It's just, he has an amazing story. So he's one of the most, inspiring, stories that I kind of look back on for inspiration and strength.
It's really interesting because, being in technology would accept a lot of challenge, like the way you start off on. what languages are you currently in love with?
In love with, that's a strong word. I really don't program very much anymore. I focus more on the architectural side of things. I focus more on scalability and system design. But in terms of languages that I do really love, I really do like Ruby. It's a language that I think it's kind of a fun language. Another language I'm interested in trying out, which I haven't been, is called Play. Actually, I just recently saw a presentation on it, and it's kind of like a Java type of language. And I think some of the things simplified a lot of the areas within Java that can be a little cumbersome or kind of seem like needless or over kind of common tasks and things like that. And so I looked at it and I did a couple tutorials on it, and it's something I'm interested in learning more about. So yeah, what's the cloud is don't play. It's written in yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm not really doing well with the systems side of things, but my friend Rebelli is like, that's how I move it down. He loves the community, he loves the language, and he'll, sometimes we'll be like on Skype or something like that, or we've done, because I'm trying to actually learn some programming. We've actually done a couple of pairing sessions, and he's just, he'll show me something like in the movies, like, look, we just do this, and that's it. I'm like, that's it. That's it right there. It's a command, that's it. That's how you do it.
Yeah. I really like that. It's really a good language. I think it's a good language for beginners too. It scales the out, which you can do some really cool things. So you can start really simply with this, and there's a lot of resources online about this. The one thing I think I always tell folks, especially minorities, about programming is that, there's like this big fear of the learning curve. They have all this money to go to all these schools and learn all of this. And I'm like, programming, pretty much everything that you need is online for free. You can find a tutorial, or, you can post a forum about how to get around something, and people will literally help you. There's like the one place in the world where, nothing can stop you.
Great sources that I'm trying to learn Python. So there's the MIT Open Courseware. They have a pretty good actually online course, free online course, and for computer science, and the language that they use, the computer science course is Python. But then there's this I guess he's a kid, he's got to be a teenager, and his name is Bucky, and he has like a ton of YouTube videos just on a variety of things, so I was Python, and he's not like, he makes it like super easy to pick up. I don't know if it's because the way he's explaining it, his YouTube handle was like New Boston or something like that. But if you look up New Boston, Python, Bucky or something, you'll pull this kid up. And he's so funny because he'll make like mistakes in explaining, not like the essential stuff, but he'll like his grammar or something like that will be kind of, he'll say something, you're like, that's not what I meant, whatever. Anyhow, let's just go on. What the heck, where did that come from? Or he'll make a type of mistake, and he'll just keep it like that. And it won't be like, because it's an act or anything like that. It'll just be like, he'll be doing a French statement, and the French statement, he'll say, the cat ate the mouse, and instead he'll put the can ate the mouse, and he'll don't worry about it, blah, blah, blah. And it's just keep on, but it's so funny, but he said it actually, I don't know why, it seems a lot easier to learn than course isn't actually a Python course. It's more of a computer science course. It uses Python, so I'm pretty sure that's why. But in the end, Steve Larry, he actually teaches some pretty good stuff.
Yeah, I think one of the best things that I've learned just using resources that people create rather than, institutions or instructors is that people tend to teach from function. So they teach you how to do something specific. And if you learn how to do that specific thing, and that specific thing is something you can apply to something else, well then you get to use access learn in a different way, rather than, learning things from the ground all the way up, where you now have to go back and try and apply the theory to something new, which is a little bit more difficult, and I think that's the most time-consuming part. It's very quickly communication.
That's a really interesting point because although I do like the way that the Monkey King he teaches, there's always something within me that wants to know, I guess, like the origin. And sometimes it's a hindrance because it's probably not it. But I hate doing something and then something else comes up and it seems like that whatever comes up is something that I should have known or something that it's taught early and I didn't pick up on, and that's what makes me like, oh man, well now I need to go back to the beginning because this sounds like something that I should have known at the beginning and I don't know it. So I always, I don't know, it's sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, but the majority of the time it's like I'll take things just totally from the ground up because I like to know like every little step of the way and don't like to get tripped up into something later on that probably what I should have known.
Yeah, it's good.
So you work for some small companies and some large companies. Tell me a little bit about what you like and dislike about both atmospheres.
Something I saw in the difference between large companies and small companies would be stability. But life has taught me differently. Because I've been through, I've been through 3 acquisitions. And being at Salesforce.com is a company where, although we're a large company, and we're a very stable company, there's a very kind of there's a constant sense of instability and innovation because things are changing so much. So although it's a stable company, it doesn't have the same kind of stability that you might expect in Oracle or General Electric or something like that, where they're not as agile. They don't change as quickly. They don't create the new trend. So stability is not a factor. I would not say that that's a factor. I think small companies can attract amazing talent. And I really like working with small companies because you really get to know the people that you're working with. They tend to be skilled at a variety of things, and they tend to do a lot of things. And so you kind of get this whole different kind of dynamic person when you're working in a smaller company, when you're working in a startup. Large company, though, this is definitely something that I did from working at a large company like Salesforce. It is perks. I mean, you've got like free food. I went, I get to travel and go off to places. There are a lot of really amazing perks that I get to enjoy in a company like that. I mean, our user conference in forward or roll back. We're all looking at the same things that you would manage in-house. You need to understand how your service provider is managing the same thing within that company. One of the things that I work really closely with the operations group and so forth, and I've had an opportunity to learn a lot about the inside and out in terms of how we manage things like disaster recovery. And we do it incredibly well. I'm always just really proud of those guys who are down there. I've been on the ground in the data centers and seen how these things work. And we do a really good job. We do a much better job than Amazon. So yeah, I definitely wouldn't compare Salesforce to Amazon either. I think systems are also very different. And I think it's just really important to know what's happening with the service providers. You don't just hand it over and just, mess your hand. You still need to maintain an intelligent IT staff personnel who's going to be able to keep an eye on their system and the longevity of it.
Yeah, I would always say one of the key things is customer education, right? If you're going to be entrusting these people with your data, with your entire operation, with some companies, then you definitely need to be asking the right questions. And sometimes the right questions is not just some of these surface questions, like, how well is trying to live up my instance. That's good, but what happens if that instance takes it up, so I never heard the question.
The question that even, can your code handle that? I mean, the infrastructure may be able to handle it, but can your code handle it properly? Is your code going to start labeling your data at a certain stage? So those are things that, even when the system is services that you're leveraging are stable, you still really have to have a really strong handle on what you're doing, how you're doing it, and why, and how you can recover if something goes wrong. There's no deterring something in today's age to not have proper disaster recovery.
And there's still a ton of companies out there that they don't even have a stretch at all. They're alone having one and never tested it. And there's a lot of companies that still do that.
You have to do disaster recovery. I mean, you need to do that, at least once a quarter, making sure that everything is being backed up appropriately, and that you can recover it. You don't just back it up and let it sit there. You actually have to test out the recovery process itself.
Definitely. Very good information there. Let's talk about PitchMixer and your involvement in what PitchMixer is.
Sure. Well, I started PitchMixer. It's kind of a funny story. I went down to LA for a what was it called? A startup conference. It was called Startup Conference. And I was sitting in this conference, and it was just a day-long event. There were some really cool people, entrepreneurs presenting, and they were calling folks up to pitch. They had some time left, and so they said, if anybody wants to come up and give you a little 30 seconds, this is like a pitch going on, right? So I'm sitting there, this guy sitting next to me, and he nudges me, and he was like, you want to go up there, you better go. I was like, what are you talking about? And he goes, if you don't go up there, you're going to regret it for the rest of your life. And I was like, dang, he must really know me. So, of course, I went up there, and, I didn't have anything to pitch. I just had, I'd been mull over an idea, I throw it out, I draw upon it, and things like that. Once in a while, I'm going to go off that page. And I feel bad for myself this guy's name, but Tony Gallagher was on he was on the program. Did I say his name right? I don't know. Yeah. He was on the big hospital.
This kind of fake guys, I've been trying to get him on. We've been playing like email tags for a while now. I've been trying to get him to be a guest on.
He is my favorite. He doesn't need the guy. He's very impressed. He actually made a really big impact on me. Because I went up there, I pitched my idea, and he goes, oh, no. He goes, you know what? The presentation was nice. He goes, it's a good idea. And he says, but you're just trying to do way too much. You're trying to do way too much. And when you try to do way too much, you don't do anything well. And I was like, oh, okay, interesting. He cut me right there on stage in front of this whole conference room full of people. But it was okay because he was cutting everybody. And then the first time I go afterwards, I went back up and I talked to him and just to get a little bit more insight about what he was saying. And he talked to me, and after that one conversation that I had with him, it made such a difference in terms of how I thought about starting up ideas and everything. So what I did is I went back and I studied a lot more, I learned a lot more, and I realized that, if it weren't for that one experience taking me through, I had some experience to start up. I never started a technology company from the ground up, software or anything like that. But I thought I knew enough. I knew enough to really get myself into some trouble, is what I think what happened. And it was really important for me to have someone who knew more to talk to me and to give me some basic information that without that conversation, I would have been in a whole other place. And so I said that's a service that a lot of people need, and especially people living in underserved communities like Oakland, California, where I'm from, like St. Louis, Missouri, like Kansas City. There are lots of areas in America don't have, Silicon Valley. They don't have their equivalent in Silicon Valley there. They're only there, especially if you didn't go to prestigious colleges. So that's really what Pitchmaster was designed to do, was to give access, give access to people in underserved communities, access to people who are startup advisors, who are venture capitalists or angel investors. And so I came up with an idea, I registered a domain, and I started a little website, blew up a little meetup group, and started socializing. I started talking about it, and folks were interested in it, and Tony Priceworth, he's one of my co-founders. He was really interested in it, and we started working together. We got a couple of really successful events off. We did one for African American History Month. We did one for Women's History Month, and we're in the process of planning another one for History 13. So it's just doing really well. The greatest thing from it is the response and reaction from people who attend. One entrepreneurs who get up and pitch, they get all this amazing feedback from these panels, almost on the panel. We have venture capitalists from Intel. We had one of those founders of YouTube on the panel. Just like amazing people in this town getting these entrepreneurs, just candid feedback. But not like a Shark Tank. They were giving feedback like constructive feedback. You should go back and look at this. Here's the resources they look at. This is really amazing how this can be folks. But then people in the audience got the benefit of that also. So it was a learning experience for everyone in the room. And this was like several hundred people in this room afterwards coming to me and saying, oh my gosh, this was amazing. I'm going to tell my kids about it. It was just like, it was awesome. And so I said, this needs to be happening in every community. And this is how we're going to build the next generation of entrepreneurs. Because there are these areas where people are scrappy, people are hungry, people come up with new innovative ideas or new things, and they just need that support to figure out how to make it real. And that's what Vision is for.
That's excellent. I totally agree. I have friends who are entrepreneurial in mind, an idea, but when it comes to actually making it real, that's where they always stumble.
And there's also the difference is, when people think about entrepreneurship and they think about starting companies, sometimes they're comfortable with thinking very small. And, we have to be able to do more than just small businesses. We have to be able to think global. So taking folks from these communities and saying, this is a great idea for California, but it's an even better idea if you can apply it to the whole world. That's where venture capital happens, right? It's something that can scale widely. And so those are conversations that a lot of folks in these communities have never had. And it really opens their eyes to a whole new world.
It's pretty inspiring. I'm always wondered or thought about this whole, because Silicon Valley has such a great ecosystem. You have the colleges, and you have venture capitalists, and you have all the startups and everything all in that area. I always wondered what would it take in order for Black communities to kind of have that same thing, as opposed to, and here's why I say this, because it seems that I always talk about this thing about visibility when it comes to Black technologists, Black entrepreneurs, and I always think that visibility is key. So, for instance, you have these people in these underserved communities, and they, for instance, come to something like, Kids Victims, which helps. Well, I wonder about the people that still view it as, okay, it's still, kind of a white man's type of world. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't think you need to the entrepreneurs in the community. You think that way? Yeah. Who kind of see that type of thing? These people who are in CCs, and I don't know, like, the big that you would feel like whether or not, you have Black CCs and then you have Black people on the panel. I'm just saying in general, and when they see this, it's still kind of hard to really visualize themselves, even if they hear it, right? It's still kind of hard to really visualize themselves doing it because they still see the person that's giving the critique, the person who was giving the money, as being like, so far, each one of our panels have had Black representation from venture capital firms. So, we always have, a female presence, even if that female presence might just be herself. We always have, a decent coverage in terms of diversity. And one of the reasons why that's really important to us at Pitch Fix is because we do seek to inspire. We do seek to be that trusted intermediary. Pitch Fix is not we're not a venture capital firm. We're not angel investors. We're not an accelerator or incubator. We're an intermediary service provider and connector. So we are engaged. The community trusts us. We have partners out in the world of entrepreneurship, and we bring those folks to those communities and we say, you know what? We've handpicked these people for your community because we know that
trying to understand how to do that. That's one of the things that we really understand how to do well. To the folks who, have this kind of mistrust in the system, and, I always say if you're trying to do everything all black, you're going to miss the call. I mean, the black community is a very small percentage of America, a very small, percentage of the world. I mean, don't forget about China, don't forget about India, right? Like, these are huge populations. So if you're trying to segregate yourself, you're going to miss out on a lot. And there are really good people out there who really care about humanity, really care about the world, really want to make a difference. And, maybe some of them just want to make money. And let me tell you, there's the white guy out there who wants to make money. And for some reason, he believes that he'll make more money off of the black guys than off of the white guy. He's going to make the money with the black guy. He's not going to let a raise stop him from making, $1 billion. So one of the things that's really important is to be able to compete in that market. And so I think what we're trying to do is make sure that our community can be properly competitive, that we have a level playing field, that you have access to the information, you have access to the coaches and the advisory that's going to be able to allow you to build a scalable, strong business model that can compete.
I like that. I actually had a conversation with a person on Global Trust the other day, and we were talking about, she had mentioned something about, there was an article that had mentioned, the article was about the most successful women in tech, and the biggest point that came out of that article, it was actually it was a video, was that they didn't let the fact that they were women, stop them from achieving success, and they pretty much, downside the, sexism and things like that occurs in places like sometimes it may occur, I shouldn't say occur, because I don't know for sure, but people say, like, hey, it's a boys club up there, and, they're kind of dismissing that whole entire notion. And she was kind of saying, like, with black people, we need to, like, segregating ourselves and having segregated groups, because and it kind of struck a nerve with me, because I understand what you're talking about, and for in the terms of building business, and the business being global, and not segregating yourself, and I'm only want to sell to my community, black people, things like that. But my point was, as far as building a community, like a community like Black Technology, I don't look at it as being, I don't look at it as exclusive. I look at it as trying to be inclusive, and even though it's like they are taking a niche out of it, from a niche, like it's already been worked, Black technologists and engineers, that's a niche within a niche. I know that, but to me, it's all about, in order to kind of break down the standard, break down this notion that, within our own culture and also within other cultures, because, we're naive, we don't think that other cultures are working in ourselves, not having the technical savvy, as a whole, and we need to get with ourselves, and we need to build up our community, and we need to, do what other cultures do, share our own knowledge, share our experiences, help each other, inspire each other. So, to me, we're both down to us. We need to build our community, take ourselves seriously when it comes to technology, help ourselves, inspire ourselves, in order for them to look at us and say, yeah, hey, they're for real about this. They do know technology, and I know, some people might say, well, why are you looking for their approval of us? I don't have enough to worry about. I mean, that's just what it is. You see it all the time. People talk about, when they sum up for us and talk about after they don't recognize us, blah, blah, blah. So we need to come together. We need to say, hey, this is what we're going to do. We're going to build up a strong community as well. And eventually, they're going to have to recognize us. And the talent is going to be in their face. But,
I mean, I think you're always going to have people who are going to be, for a better term, but assholes. You're always going to have assholes, right? So you're not going to please everyone. So if you're trying to go after, the guy with the big ego, who, until you show him up, he's not going to recognize you. I mean, screw that guy. Honestly, really. Who cares? What are you trying to achieve? Always take it back to what you're trying to achieve, what your mission is, what your goal is. My goal is not to have any person anywhere come over and acknowledge me. I don't care. My goal is to have a great, happy life where I do things that I'm passionate about, that I love, that excite me. Where I get to interact with people who I think are awesome and talented, and I get to learn from them, and they get to learn from me, and we do amazing things in the world. That's what my mission is. So as far as that's concerned, I don't have any racial barriers or gender barriers to achieving that. And I think that if you focus on that, then you'll have a much better experience in the world. Now, are there barriers for me because of my race? Are there barriers for me because of my gender? Certainly. Of course there are. I get misjudged all the time. I get prejudged all the time. But the good thing is that because I don't let it impact my disposition, I get to have conversations with these people after the fact about their previous professions with me. And so, I enjoy that because, now I've had an opportunity to actually show somebody the light. And maybe the next person to come back to me won't have the same experience that I have. So I think it's really important to stay focused. Don't let any negativity push you off of your game and what you're trying to achieve. And on the segregation piece, I believe that the first form of segregation is family and friends. I have a tight-knit family. I have a tight-knit set of friends. And I'm not going to just let anyone into that circle. And so, unless I really like you, unless I see that you're trustworthy, unless I see that you have some really great value, that you're gonna stand with us, and we're gonna all have fun together, then I'll let you in. And so I think about the startup world and being that those folks out there, they don't know me. They don't know who I am. If they don't know who you are, and they don't know someone who knows you, they're not going to be all that welcoming to you because they don't know you. So that's why having our own network is really important because we don't have I can't really say we don't have that big of a barrier against each other being African Americans because in some cases we do. And the race, have more of a barrier, just to be truthful. But when we're interested in connecting as a community, we give each other that opportunity, we give each other that space to say, who are you? Let me get to know this new person. What that does is it allows our community to grow, and it gives us opportunities to bring new people into our extended network. So you don't come together as a bunch of black people and you stick together, as a bunch of black people. No, you get together as a community of people who have something in common. You find other things you have in common, and you take those people to the other people who who have things in common with them. And now you've extended that person's network. You've extended their network. You've extended the network of the other people in your network, and that's value.
Yeah, and that's exactly how I feel, working technology. That's the premise of why I feel, working technology. That was when I first going to a lot of tech conferences, going to Linux conferences. It's just the lack of, black attendees, whether, in attendance or just or speaking. That's what got me to say, hey, I don't understand why we're not coming to these conferences. I don't understand the mindset behind not wanting to come and learn. Maybe it's comfortability thing, I don't know. But I do know that we should be here. And I do know that, these other people are here, and they seem to have their, kind of clips in their communities and everything like that. Why can't we have all communities to where we can network and share knowledge, share ideas, share experiences, and connect with each other? And I mean, that was the biggest. It wasn't out to prove something to somebody. It was just, hey, let's build a community. Let's bond together and connect with each other and take it from there. So,
I think one of the arguments to that is that, a lot of the communities gather together around, for example, shared language, right? Or some other culture. It's not necessarily race. Whereas, we as African Americans here in America, we tend to gather together on the basis of race. And some African Americans find out that that's one of the things that we kind of have to learn how to combat, that it's not about race. It's about coming together to help certain people with common issues, with common experiences. It just happens to be the color of our skin.
Yeah, definitely. Great. Let's keep it moving. So, you mentioned in your bio, and let me know if you got a work or something like that. You mentioned in your bio that you've been around video games. That's one of your latest passions. Something to tell us about, what type of games you're creating, what platform are you using to design the games?
So we just finished 2 video games. One is they're both educational video games that were designed for the Android tablet, and they're also for very young kids from ages 3 to 6. So they're pretty simple. One is a basic kite flying type of game where you collect numbers and shapes and things of that nature. Another one is there's an obstacle course built where there's the blocks and you have to kind of finish the puzzle so that the ball can jump the ramps and things of that nature. So those were the two games that we just finished developing. We actually developed them for the Jim Henson Company for Volleyball Science Kids. Those are good. So the games kind of have a bit of a science element to it in terms of, involving the wind and aerodynamics and sports and inertia summer, and the game in the fall. Those were just two fairly basic games. I have always been passionate about RPGs, role-playing games, and one of my biggest projects that I'm in the process of refining is an RPG that has a bit of an educational spin to it, whereas the mini games are educational, but you get to build your character, you get to live in this world, things that you can relate to in the world, common problems that you might face, real social issues, things like that. So that's a pretty complicated project. It's a really big project, so we'll see how far it gets. We're going to have some other concepts that I'm playing around with as well, just the word games and stuff like that. So I've always wanted to make video games when I was a kid. I was one of those kids who, literally, I would play the Nintendo all day long if I could. And they called me the Wiz. Like, everybody on the block called me the Wiz. And I was back good at the game. So, building games has been like all my walking the mind. And so, Intuitive Interactive is the name of the game development company that we started. And it's been really a pleasure to have some amazing co-founders. My co-founders is out of Houston, Texas, and was out of Arizona, and another one's out of Oklahoma. So we all kind of get together. Actually, we got together, kind of sealed our partnership at South by Southwest earlier this year, which is kind of funny for us.
And you were so proud of Minnesota to meet you.
Yeah, no, see what happens. You don't always see the black people. Yeah, really, I love South by Southwest. I'm really excited about continuing this time around. And, I didn't know. I didn't have time to submit the session, but I
Gotcha. Yeah, hopefully I'll be going back this year. Not set in stone yet, but I'm hoping. The answer to the platform, so they're available out there working right now.
They're not able to, they're still going through they're actually up in the hospital, so it's a platform specifically for a specific type of tablet that has its own market. That's on Android. So they're still in the process of releasing that. So we kind of open and they have their own process. So I wanted to ask for it. But we do also use a Unity platform, which is a nice, simple platform, for you to develop things on that can be used on various platforms. You can export to iOS, you can export to Android, web, etc. Yeah, it's a nice platform for people who are out there interested in game development.
I've been sick of working stuff. I'm not a game developer, but it's always like last year, man.
Yeah.
That's excellent.
Building Our Brown has an interesting story. So I'm gonna tell it how I was told it. So I was introduced to Building Our Brown by Total Platform, and later on I met really awesome lady named Kimberly Dillon, and she's the founder of a company and app called I Love My Hair. So check out Kimberly's app from iOS if you have a chance. So they were all out, talking about blacks and this, the blacks and that. And she said we should start a community around it. So they started it. They called it Build Our Brown. And it really just took off. I'm really proud of how it's taken off. And a lot of the, reason why it's done so well is because of Khalil. He's a really great community manager. He's really great at spreading the word out there and getting people on the West Coast, we have a group on the East Coast. You're a member of them both, right? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And build our partnership to Facebook. That's really all it is. We just interact on Facebook, but it's a great method of sharing information. And it's bi-coastal too. Like, that's incredible. Like, because last time I was in Washington D.C., I connected with a woman from down in D.C. who I've been introduced to through the Build Our Founder, but she has one of her own community down there in D.C. So it's a great way of networking and extending your reach and meeting people and sharing resources.
Excellent. Yeah,
it's out there. We're looking for it. Just go on Facebook and search for Build Our Founder, and you should find it. Or you can find it through myself or Greg or whatever else that you may have. You can start it. They're probably building Our Founder.
Yeah, that's what I like the most about the whole community aspect. It's like just the outreach that we have. And like I said before, Blacks in Technology is now up to 665 members nationwide. And when I first started, it was just me and a friend, and I just started hitting the social networks and hitting up LinkedIn, creating a group there. It just took off from there. And people from all over, the nation, it amazes me somehow because, when I first was thinking like, I'll get about 100 people, and to me that would have been successful, to me. And now we're to 665, and it's kind of taken on, a life of its own.
That's great. Okay. That's really like, I love the story too, because I feel like that's how it happens for everybody. You just start out with everything, and then it gets bigger than we can expect.
Yeah, exactly. And now it's just kind of rolling for, other things. Like, I didn't have really any intentions on, I wanted to build the community, to create that community, that atmosphere for the site. But I wasn't thinking about a conference, or I wasn't thinking that now that's when it's pretty much emerging into self-study. The big tech digest is going to be launching in a couple of weeks, which is, we've talked about, which is going to be, for me, hopefully it's going to be huge. It's going to be a good resource for us as well. But, I'm also going to be partnering up with my man Blair from Blossom Software and trying to bring a Blacks in Technology conference to fruition in around 2014. So that's another thing. That I want to get a video tech show out there. Blacks in Technology video tech show. So a lot of these things are kind of like, popping out. So hopefully, we'll see.
Yeah, exactly. You got Mario Armstrong. You know Mario?
I don't know, but I know him. He's like a super player.
Yeah. I love his show. I love his TikTok.
All right, so we're going to go for speed round, and then we're going to get out of here. So speed round. This is basically what I just asked you, some questions, so it's either I want to ask you to answer, wonder you put with that list. So,
I get to say why?
Go ahead, my speed round. This is what family time.
Family time.
Good answer. Star Wars or Star Trek? Star Trek. Good answer. DC or Marvel?
That's hard. hard question right there, okay, because let me tell you why. So when I was young, you asked this earlier on, I'm glad that you were getting to the comic part. I don't know if you remember the Teen Titans. Well, the Teen Titans was before X-Men. The Teen Titans were five X-Men. And, then there's also Batman, in my opinion, Spider-Man, right? And so those are, that's just like, those are some incredible, combinations. So, you know what? I'm going to have to go with DC.
Wow. DC, sure, what do you want?
I'm going with DC. Now, the reason why is because of the story content of the story. They're a lot deeper in the DC storyline. I love the characters. I love the Marvel characters. Their characters are amazing. I love the X-Men. I love Spider-Man. But when I go into the sagas of DC have always been far greater.
It's funny. I've always been a Marvel person. And for that exact reason that you mentioned, because of the characters, I always thought they had more human side to them compared to a lot of the DC characters. A lot of DC characters to me seem so godlike. And it just seems like they were just like so invincible. I think with the DC 52, they kind of paid them back a little bit, but before they were like, look at me, Superman. He's like the most powerful, on the planet. Look at me, he's like the fastest thing ever. The big green lantern. He translates one's time and Wonderful, and then it just went on and on and on. Like, nobody can beat these times. They're just waves. Of course, they always had, the arch nemesis who always had some type of power that could kill it. But this is like the power, it's just way too powerful. I like, like people like in the X-Men where they're powerful, like they have a specific and a real cool power, but at the same time, that power get to the top, they look like they could be beat, so I always like that side of it. That's why I like that. I like all of the racial makeup like X-Men. I always like that. The diversity of it. I think I would be diversity better. Yeah. All right. And enjoy that, my Alex.
For stability, I went for possibility Android.
Very, very political.
I think Android has, some original basic capabilities. I think they've done some really nice innovations. But I think they have a really huge market opportunity. But they've got some real big challenges to overcome in that process. And
I agree.
Incredibly well.
Yeah, I do agree. I had the iPhone before, and I went to an Android-based phone simply because, I use more Android-based or Google-based services. And so I just was like, on top of that, the phone was, had the specs, was a lot bigger, blah, blah. And I like it, but it's not nearly as intuitive or as stable as iOS was at all.
Yeah. Well, I had a few issues with my iPhone before I upgraded it to the latest operating system. But because I started having problems with it, I upgraded. I didn't have any problems.
All right. Next question. Archer or American Dad?
I've never been a big fan of American Dad. I don't know what Archer is.
no one. I'm doing family because I would think that it's hilarious. One of my friends, actually, I was going to, I had a question for you about that, but I'm not to it. He pretty much hit me to it, and I was just like, actually, I wanted to watch it, but I never know it. And then kind of wish I actually watched it on a plane over we go in Orlando or something like that. And it just, it's funny. It's like Family Guy, Archer is like, to me, it's funnier because it's more mature. But it's still just, it's silly. It's very, very silly. Like, next question, Hacker. So what else was it? Because I have questions. I'm recording to you. Yeah, according to me, it's awesome. Our Hackers, beautiful stuff is like, definitely Hackers, yeah. What's that? Yeah, I was, what you said was Hackers, I was just like, ooh, this is awesome. I've always been, on the innocent side. You probably can't tell because I like Family Guy, but I've always been over there. Yeah, that's what for sure. I think it's a war day. It's just a Hackers award day. It's one of them. I'm not really writing it. You have the same war days. Oh, Hackers, let me see. Your assignment for tonight is start your organic. You should watch the past both seasons of Officer of this entirety and war days of this entirety and write a 4-page report on it. Now I know when I started talking to Jerry, that was more work. And you tell who I'm going to be avoiding from now on. Oh, man. I'll do your homework. Now, what should I do with it? I pictured a friend of mine who is in I don't know if you know how he's done for. No, I don't know. Okay, so Nerd Corps is pretty much music about nerdy stuff. There's a lot of Nerd Corps groups out there. Some of them are more obsessive, some of them are kind of rocky, some of them are kind of thrash, heavy metal type stuff. But some of them are hip-hop. And a friend of mine, he is a reverse engineer in Delaware, analysis guy. He actually just moved out to San Francisco. He has an airport hip-hop group called Dope War. And it's pretty much hip-hop about easy stuff, computers, games, all types of stuff. And it's I need to check them out. I got another one. I don't know. DopeWarMusic.com. Look them up. And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. Now, some of my songs is but his music is, he comes from a real hip-hop background. I shouldn't say real, like, Nerdcore is real hip-hop, but he comes from, if you like hip-hop music, he comes from the hip-hop music background, and that's what makes his music so good, because it's not like a dirty guy trying to do hip-hop. He's more of a hip-hop guy, and he just happens to be a seriously brilliant hacker / reverse engineer / malware analysis guy. So, that's good stuff. And with that, I'm going to wrap up this podcast. I would definitely want to thank you for spending an hour and a half of your life with us on this podcast. Definitely appreciate having you on the show. It was a pleasure. I enjoyed it. It was quite a good conversation about you, and thanks for inviting me. Yeah, I love to say. I always like to invite people on podcasts because there was lots of technology. It's totally free. You don't have to fees or have to anything at all. Just, pictures of audio, collaboration with some of the people online. So there, we have our forum, we have our social network on it as well. We have podcasts, of course, online videos, everything. Within the community. So definitely I would like to. And also the Black Technology Tech Digest. I know I've already talked to you about contributing. Hopefully, you can do that. But I want to do something for PitchMixer on the website. Right now, we're going to be doing some advertising for Black Girls Code, Black Elders. So they're going to be like our first two organizations that's going to be on the site. And so, I'll probably keep them up for them. We'll definitely want to get, PitchMixer on there as well. That definitely needs to be a great organization. It needs to be what you're doing. And it needs to be getting out by as many people as possible. So definitely send me some stuff on PitchMixer. And we'll get it up on the site. Before we go, if you have any Twitter handles, URLs, or anything that you want to mention, go ahead and mention that.
So definitely, I plug the Walk Around group with Facebook. Check us out on PitchMixer. Follow us on Twitter. Go to the website, pitchmixer.com. There's a link to one of the bottom to register. We also have a meetup group. You can follow me on Twitter at IAYORI, Lori. And there's also, especially if you're Black Women in Technology or you support Black Women in Technology, follow BWI Computing, Black Women in Computing, on Twitter. And we also have a Black Women in Computing group on Facebook, and its entire message is around encouraging young African Americans and African American women to pursue studies and careers in science, technology, engineering, and math.
Excellent. Great. Once again, thank you. And hopefully we'll be talking here soon.
Cool, of course. It was great talking to you, Frank.
Okay. Take care. Be safe.
Blacks in Technology.
Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology.